Close your eyes and think of France. What do you see? You likely see the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower, the sun-drenched vineyards of Bordeaux, or the high-fashion boutiques of the Champs-Élysées. We've been conditioned to view France as the pinnacle of Western sophistication, a land of effortless luxury, 5-week vacations, and a state that takes care of your every need. For decades, the world has looked at the French model with a mix of envy and admiration. But there is a silent, creeping crisis happening behind that glamorous facade. If you look past the postcards and dig into the cold, hard financial data, a different picture emerges. It's a picture of a nation that is structurally stagnating, a nation where the average citizen is significantly poorer than their American counterpart, and a nation that is currently sprinting toward a 2025 fiscal reckoning that no one is talking about. The truth is, France is poorer than you think, and the reasons why are buried deep in its historical finance and a social contract that is finally beginning to tear at the seams. We've all heard the arguments that Europe is a lifestyle superpower, while America is a work superpower. But as we enter 2025, that trade-off is no longer a choice, it's a trap. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the French economy. We're going to explore how a series of fatal historical decisions turned a global powerhouse into a nation struggling to pay its bills. This isn't just about numbers. It's about the hidden reality of what it means to live in a country that has prioritized the past over the future. To understand why France is poorer than you think, we first have to talk about the most basic metric of prosperity: purchasing power. For the average American viewer, the numbers coming out of France are genuinely shocking. In the United States, we often complain about inflation and the cost of living, but the median household income in the US towers over that of France. If France were to join the United States as the 51st state, it would likely rank among the poorest in the Union, sitting somewhere near Mississippi or West Virginia in terms of GDP per capita. While a mid-level professional in Dallas or Chicago might expect to earn $80,000 or $90,000 a year, their equivalent in Paris is often struggling to break 45,000 euros, and that's before the taxman even knocks. This brings us to the first pillar of the French economic tragedy: the weight of the state. France has one of the highest tax-to-GDP ratios in the developed world, often hovering around 45%. In America, we debate the nuances of tax brackets, but in France, taxation isn't just a policy, it's a national religion. Everything is taxed. Your income is taxed, your spending is taxed, and your very existence as an employer is taxed so heavily that it creates a massive deterrent to growth. This creates a strange paradox. You see, the French state provides free healthcare, free university, and robust unemployment benefits. But as any student of historical finance will tell you, nothing is ever truly free. The French people pay for these services every single day, through suppressed wages and a lack of upward mobility. When you speak to a young person in Lyon or Marseille, you don't hear about the French dream. You hear about le déclassement, the feeling of being moved down the social ladder. In the US, the goal is often to build wealth. In France, for the vast majority of the population, the goal has shifted to simply maintaining a standard of living that is slowly evaporating. This stagnation didn't happen overnight. To find the roots of this decline, we have to go back to a period the French call les 30 glorieuses, the 30 glorious years between 1945 and 1975. Following World War II, France underwent a miraculous transformation. It was a period of rapid industrialization, the birth of the nuclear energy program, and the rise of massive state-backed champions like Renault and Total. During this time, the French economy was a juggernaut. They were building the Concorde, pioneering high-speed rail with the TGV, and creating a modern, centralized state that seemed to have found the perfect balance between capitalism and socialism. But the glory years left a dangerous legacy, a belief that the state could and should control the gears of the economy forever. When the oil shocks of the 1970s hit, the world changed. The US and the UK eventually responded with the market-driven reforms of the 80s, embracing globalization and the tech revolution. France, however, doubled down on dirigisme, a state-directed economic system. In 1981, France elected François Mitterrand, who initially responded to the global recession by nationalizing banks and industries, raising the minimum wage, and shortening the workweek. It was a noble attempt to protect the worker, but in a globalizing world, it was the beginning of a long, slow divorce from economic reality. By the time the 1990s and 2000s rolled around, France found itself in a structural trap. To maintain the generous social benefits established during the boom years, the government had to keep taxes high and regulations tight. But those high taxes and regulations made French companies less competitive on the global stage. This led to chronic unemployment, particularly among the youth. For decades, the French unemployment rate has sat stubbornly high, often double that of the US or Germany. When you have a massive chunk of your population not working and the rest being taxed at astronomical levels to support them, you aren't building a sustainable economy, you're managing a decline. This decline is most visible in the death of French industry. There was a time when made in France meant industrial excellence. Today, outside of luxury goods and aerospace, that industrial base has been hollowed out. While Germany managed to maintain its manufacturing prowess, France saw its factories close as production moved to Eastern Europe or Asia. This deindustrialization has created a two-speed France. There's the France of the elite, the high-earning bureaucrats and luxury executives in Paris, and then there is the peripheral France, the small towns and rural areas where the shops are boarded up and the only growth industry is the local government office. But why are we calling the 2025 situation a fatal truth? Because for the last 20 years, France has used one specific tool to hide its decline: debt. Since the global financial crisis of 2008, the French government has not run a balanced budget. In fact, France hasn't had a balanced budget since the mid-1970s. For a long time, this didn't seem to matter. Interest rates were low, and the world was happy to lend money to a stable G7 nation. But that era of easy money is over. As we look toward 2025, the French debt-to-GDP ratio has surged past 110%. To put that in perspective, that is significantly higher than most of its European peers and is reaching levels that historically trigger a loss of investor confidence. The French state is now spending more on interest payments than it does on its entire defense budget. Think about that for a second. The nation of Napoleon and de Gaulle is now paying more to bankers just to service its past mistakes than it is to protect its future. This brings us to the core of the problem for the US audience to understand. The American economy, for all its flaws, is built on dynamism and risk. The French economy is built on stability and preservation. But you cannot preserve your way to prosperity in a world that is moving at the speed of AI and silicon. There is no French Google, there is no French SpaceX, there is no French Amazon. When a culture penalizes failure through rigid labor laws and rewards sitting still through massive social transfers, it loses the ability to innovate. The hidden truth is that the French lifestyle, those long lunches and the 35-hour workweek, is being subsidized by a mountain of debt that is finally becoming unsustainable. In 2025, the French government is facing a series of fiscal cliffs. They have to find tens of billions of euros in savings just to keep the deficit from spiraling out of control. This is why you see the massive strikes and the yellow vest protests. It's the sound of a population realizing that the free services they were promised are being cut while their cost of living continues to rise. If you walk through a supermarket in a middle-class American suburb and compare it to one in a middle-class French suburb, the difference in the basket of goods is revealing. The American consumer has access to a level of abundance and variety that the average French person simply cannot afford. In France, electricity prices are skyrocketing despite their nuclear advantage because of convoluted EU energy market rules and a lack of investment in the aging grid. Gas is double the price of what we pay in the States. Electronic goods, cars, and even basic clothing are significantly more expensive relative to their wages. The resolution to this story isn't a happy one, but it is a necessary one to hear. France is at a crossroads. The fatal truth of 2025 is that the French model has reached its limit. You cannot have a 21st century welfare state with a 20th century tax base and a 19th century bureaucracy. For the average Frenchman, being poorer than you think means that the safety net they've relied on is becoming a cage. They're protected from the harshness of American-style capitalism, but they are also denied its opportunities. The key takeaway here is a lesson in historical finance that applies to every nation, including the USA. Productivity is the only true source of wealth. You can borrow to hide a lack of productivity for a decade, or even two, but eventually the math wins. France's decline serves as a warning of what happens when a nation stops asking, "How do we grow?" and starts asking, "Who do we tax?" The beauty of France will always remain, but the economic engine that once powered it is sputtering. The 2025 truth is no longer hidden, it's written in the debt clocks and the stagnant paychecks of 68 million people who are realizing that the good life was actually a loan they can no longer afford to repay. As we continue to watch the global economy shift, the story of France reminds us that prestige is not the same as prosperity. A country can be culturally rich and financially broke at the same time. The question for the next decade is whether France can rediscover the entrepreneurial spirit of the Trente Glorieuses, or if it will continue its slide into becoming a picturesque museum of what Western civilization used to be. If you found this deep dive into the hidden reality of the French economy insightful, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who want to understand the truth behind the headlines. Don't forget to subscribe to Financial Documentary for more investigations into historical finance and economic shifts shaping our world in 2025 and beyond. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the US is heading toward a similar debt trap, or is our economic dynamism enough to save us from the French fate? And if you've lived in or visited France recently, did you notice the gap between the tourist image and the economic reality? Let's get a discussion going below. If you want to see more, click on one of the videos on your screen now to explore our other documentaries on global finance and the secrets of the world's most powerful economies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.